So, Stephen, I appreciate you joining us. Give us a little background, what led up to you joining Elite Finishing. How long have you been with them, and what is your position there, and your background?
Yeah, Tim. Well, first and foremost, I kind of feel like I have some imposter syndrome. I just want to thank you for providing a website to someone like me. Finishingandcoding.com's been really an invaluable resource, and it's been.
Well, thank
I
you.
enjoy reading, about other metal finishing shops, and I've learned a lot on there. I've saved a lot of articles. If I run into problems, I've reached out to those people that you've had write those articles on there, and
Oh, well, great. Thank you.
yeah, fortunately enough for me, a lot of them have responded and provided me with a lot of help. But so my background, I worked at another metal finishing shop for approximately 5 years in Orange County, and I was fortunate enough. My good friend, he was helping out his dad run an anodizing shop, and they were purchasing another shop that uh, did a lot of work for Disneyland, and he needed help. He needed help managing that, and I was kind of in a point of my career where I wasn't really satisfied with what I was doing, and he offered me this position. I said sure. I had no idea what I was getting into. I didn't really understand metal finishing. I didn't know how important it was to the world and everything around us. So it's been a whirlwind of a ride. A lot of ups and downs, a lot of learning experiences. I kind of think of it as like a second college almost. I went to college. I majored in business administration, and then I kind of started this other sort of education with metal finishing and
On the job training. All right, on the job.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. So it's been really rewarding as well. So, and then after working for that company for a while, me and my girlfriend, kind of, she's from San Diego. And I've always liked coming down here, and so we decided, start looking for places down here. And I actually called into Elite Metal Finishing. I talked with Sue Russo, the general manager here, over the phone, and asked her, "Hey, are you guys hiring at all? I'm looking to apply." And so they had me come in and do an in-person interview, and they liked me enough to hire me. And so I actually started out in final inspection, doing some shipping and receiving. And I was, after a couple months here, Dan started to invite me into the managers' meetings that we would have periodically. And the decision was made to work on a Nadcap accreditation in about January 2023. So I was still in my position. And another thing I think catalyzed it too was one of our biggest customers moved all their operations essentially to Mexico. So that was a really big account for us. So that really hurt. And then we were kind of, even though we started working on the Nadcap process, we had another blow dealt to us. And one of our major end users of what they would call a prime in Nadcap terms required that all chemical processors be Nadcap accredited in September 2023. So we saw more and more customers drop off, unfortunately. And so that really kind of sped up the process. And by that time, it was August 2023, my predecessor retired. So I was given the opportunity to become the quality manager. And, looking back on it, I probably wasn't the most qualified, but I really appreciate Dan giving me the opportunity to take on such a challenge, and it really was a huge challenge. Our initial audit was set for April 2024, and as we got closer and closer, I felt like we still weren't in compliance with most of the Nadcap guidelines. So we actually pushed it out to July, and I'm glad we did, because ultimately we passed the audit, but
Right.
really there was no contribution, not that much contribution on my part to the whole Nadcap process and my previous position at Elite. So I kind of dove into this head first, learning the requirements, making sure that we are following all the guidelines and checklists, reviewing all those anodizing, chem film, painting specs again, making sure we're doing all the correct periodic testing is one of the major things that an auditor will look at when they come to your shop.
So let me ask you a question. I mean, did you all, when you first decided this is the way we're going to go, what was the first step? I mean, did you talk to any other shops or any other people, any consultants, and ask them, what would be our? I'm assuming it's best to have a plan to attack this, so to speak. What was one of the first steps you all did?
Yeah, so I believe one of the first steps we did, and like I said, my involvement was very little before I actually became a quality manager here. But I think one of the first things we did, we got in touch with a consultant. And we were really lucky. His name's Hung Nguyen. He was absolutely the best resource we could have had. We made such a good choice choosing him. He's worked in metal finishing shops pretty much his entire career. He has really, really deep knowledge of, what's required for Nadcap, for chemical processors. So we really lucked out, having him as our consultant. So I think that was one of the first steps. Going on to,
I think I was going to say one of the things I think we were talking about was, of reviewing your own quality manuals, right? Your own procedures, and seeing, how far along you are in this Nadcap process. Was that one of the first things you did, was kind of look and see where are we now compared to what they're asking us to do?
Yeah, that's a huge thing that you as a quality manager will need to do. I mean, assuming you already have a quality manual in place, forms, quality procedures, work instructions, the big thing is that even though you have them, you need to go checkpoint by checkpoint on the Nadcap checklist. Does it answer explicitly yes or no for this requirement? And if there's any doubt, or if it's no, you need to revise that document to make sure that it does, or else you will get what they call a finding during an audit. And those are split up into two different types: as a minor or major finding. For example, a major finding is something that has potential impact on parts that you've processed. Something minor is, for example, a label for your tank was not on the tank, and one of the things that happened to us, unfortunately, one of the labels fell off the tank, and we didn't catch it during the audit, and so that was what they would call a minor finding. So those are usually pretty easy fixes, but you want to try to avoid the major ones. So going question by question or statement by statement in those checklists for Nadcap is super important, and that's something you'll do during a self audit. You're actually required to submit a self audit answering all those questions on the checklist 30 days prior to your on-site audit.
On-site audit, right? So I understand too that you, like I said, when you said you hired the consultant, he actually came in and did an audit his first, right? He kind of started that off with doing an audit and giving an assessment. How did that go for you all?
Yeah, so he made his way down here and he walked the shop, and
Mm-hmm.
we had a meeting afterwards and told us what he saw, all his observations, and he followed up with an email in writing. Uh, so there's some things we need to address as soon as possible. Here's some other things that you eventually need to address, but you can, work on these other things first. So, and he did, I think he came to the shop at least 3 or 4 times, before our actual audit on site. So,
Mm,
and I think that's one of the major things. When you hire a consultant, you want to get him inside your shop, preferably, because that'll be the best way for him to see anything that's out of sort or needs to be corrected immediately. Um, because
right.
you'll do an audit, you'll do a self audit with you and your managers as well, and there'll be times it happened to us where maybe you have a certain interpretation of a requirement, and and management are all agreement on that interpretation, but in actuality, that's not how it's interpreted by the staff or the auditor at PRI.
Right.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of good to have someone come from the outside, like your consultant, and clear those things up. Or if you have any doubt on a requirement, you should get with your consultant to clear that up, or you can email the folks at PRI for
Right.
clarification.
For clarification, yeah. I was going to say, so I guess you did the consultant audit, and then you did the self audit. And I guess, like you said, you're putting together, I guess, the list, kind of a checklist of things that you've got to take care of, right? That you have to get ready as you move forward on this.
Right. Yeah. And one of the things we did too, and it's is create an action item list.
Mm,
After you had your consultant come out, after you reviewed the checklist against all your forms and procedures and work instructions, you create an action item list. And delegation is super important. I There's no way you can do this by yourself. It's a beast.
right.
There's many times where I felt like Churchill during the Blitz, trying to tackle this,
Right.
these checklists and ensure the shop's in compliance. Um,
Right.
so I think that's a big thing, creating an action item list, most important to least important,
Right.
delegating that out to the certain managers, um, and your other coworkers that can take on some tasks for you, I think is huge.
Right. Yeah, and you mentioned that, and I think we're talking about the next step would be, when we talk about training, you've got to get everybody there, and every role has got to be ready for this audit, right? They have to get their training. Talk a little bit about that. What was that undertaking like, and what all did it encompass? That.
Yeah, so training is another big task to take on. Um, I think in my experience, and I'm sure other people have experiences too, is I feel like it's one of the hardest things, um, because what's going to happen is you'll have all these quality procedures and work instructions and forms in place already, and then there's probably going to be some changes that you need to make. So
Mm,
you can't just go and change a form that one of your coworkers is filling out on a daily basis and just change it on them and expect them to fill it out properly. Every time you revise something, there should be training done on it. So that's one thing I learned going through this process. Anytime a work instruction is revised, anytime a quality procedure is revised, there should always be training conducted on that revision, what's been revised.
mm,
Um, I think one of one of the important things too is, all the people working at the shop, they hear Nadcap this, Nadcap this. Well, what is this whole Nadcap thing that we're
Right.
doing?
What's the
So I
meaning
think,
behind it? Right. Yeah.
yeah, what's the whole meaning behind this? Why is management, so gung ho on this? So I think um, the importance behind NADCAP, and training on that, explaining that to your coworkers, people on the floor, I think is vital. One of the things I tell my coworkers is, hey, look, you're going to be touching parts, working on parts that are critical to the safety of aircraft, and the safety of people on those aircraft, and critical to the safety of our members of the military, things like that. So it takes on a whole new seriousness,
Right.
and why we're doing this, why we're doing all this training, why we're having all these meetings, why it's so important to really pay attention to the paperwork and instructions, all those things. I think so. Flowing that down to all the people in the shop, I think really helps set the tone for NADCAP,
Mm.
and let them know how serious this is.
Right. Right. You also mentioned, I think, like you said, preventive maintenance, housekeeping, those type of things are very important in this, in the NADCAP certification process, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. You want to really practice good cleanliness on the line. Um,
Mm.
Cleaning up any sort of spillage on the rim tanks, or on the rims of the tanks, for example. Uh, Especially in the lab too, really practicing good housekeeping.
Hmm.
Beakers, glassware, making sure that's clean. Um, because every auditor is different that comes from PRI, but you might have an auditor that has a background in chemistry, for example, or who's
Mm.
worked in a lab or worked at a metal finishing shop,
Right.
and so
Peculiar attention to that. Yeah, they're going to be very paying attention to that.
yeah, yeah. So and they start seeing dirty glassware, and they're gonna question your whole titration process in your lab, and
Mm.
they're gonna say, well, how can we know for certain that you are getting accurate results with dirty glassware? So,
Right.
and the same
Right.
same goes for the plating line. How can we be certain that there's no contamination in your tanks with your work bars having corrosion on them, or chemical
Mm.
spillage around the tank? So really getting a good preventive maintenance program in place is critical. Having people that know about the metal finishing industry, the process, um, I think is super important. Um, that was one of the things that we, during the audit, we learned a lot for preventive maintenance, and so we created a lot of forms. Things to check on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a monthly basis, um, because the other thing that's super important is having objective evidence that the preventive maintenance is being done.
Right.
So,
Right. Right. Yeah.
so implementing those forms was something that we did. Um, Chemical storage is another big one. Um, we had a lot of help from Dan Zinman at Miles
Oh,
Chemical.
yeah. Sure.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
saw you just had him on.
Yeah.
Dan's a great supplier for us. So Miles, they helped us create essentially a list of, these are acids, these are bases, these are organics, non-organics, and these are how they should be segregated. Because one of the number one findings that almost every shop gets during an audit is mixing acids and bases, being too close
Mm.
to each other.
Right. Right.
So, the
I
little
was going to
things
say the
like
one thing.
that.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the things you were talking about with the lab was, I know you mentioned as a note to me, was that really trying to eliminate the human error factor, right? Everything is, you want to eliminate that as much as you possibly can. And how do you do that?
Yeah. So, for example, what I mean by eliminating the human error is um, you have some of these titrations, and they call out a color endpoint when you're titrating the solution. So, one of the things, what happened to us was during a titration, it was to be a certain color. And, as you might know, colors can be subjective between each person. I may see a blue, you may see a
Right.
blue green, you may see another person may see a green yellow. Um, so unfortunately, this titration had that kind of subjectiveness to it. So my recommendation is if you can, if it's in your budget, to get an auto titrator, because that way you can titrate to a certain pH endpoint, because the pH value is objective compared to a color endpoint.
Right.
So some chemicals will list out two methods of titration, one being by a color endpoint, one being by a pH endpoint, and you always want to go use the pH method if you can,
Mm.
because um, if you miss an endpoint, once again, it kind of brings doubt into your whole process. How can we trust
Right.
that your concentrations of your solutions are accurate? Things like that. And what could be a minor finding turns into a major finding, and it
Right.
becomes a real
Mm.
headache.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I guess to kind of finalize the processes here is that you mentioned periodic testing, right? Going back and just are you just testing just to make sure everyone's following procedures, or what are you testing for?
Yeah, so for example, we'll go with the anodized specifications, MIL PRF 8625 revision F.
Hmm.
I think it's on amendment 2 now. So within that spec, there are required periodic tests.
Mm.
So if your shop does anodizing, you really want to know the requirements of that specification besides the workmanship standards. You want to know the required periodic tests, because they'll list tests in there. For example, light fastness. Light
Mm.
fastness is only required if your customer specifies it in the contract, terms and conditions, or the PO. Um, so reviewing the specs is super important, because that is one of the major things an auditor will look at. And if you're not doing the required periodic testing, that's a major finding. And uh, the specs call out that you can't resume production until that periodic test is completed and passed. So
Right. Right.
it's super
Right.
important that you do the correct periodic test, review your customers' terms and conditions, um, re- make sure that your contract reviewers are have a really fine eye on the POs, um, because that can be really devastating if you're not following those requirements.
Right. Right. When did you all? When was the did you all pass your certification? When was that? That was just.
So we passed the audit in July, and then
Mhm.
we had findings. As a shop, you think you've done your audits, you're well prepared,
Mhm.
and you think you've done everything right. But most of the time, you'll at least have one or two findings that
Mm.
that'll happen during audit that you overlooked, or you interpreted one way and you didn't get clarification on it, or you and your consultant thought that the requirement meant this when it actually meant that.
Mm.
And like I said earlier, every auditor is different, for what I'm told. Um, some auditors have more of a finer eye, I would say,
Mm.
or more attention to detail than other auditors. So,
Right. Right.
um, so after the audit was over, we had our findings. And in those findings, you have to essentially do a root cause analysis.
Right.
A lot of quality managers are probably familiar with scars from their customers.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty similar to that, except these are the most intense scars I've ever had to do. Um,
Right. Right.
so you think you may have answered the 5 whys, but there's probably deeper that you can go.
Mm-hmm.
So the first round you get, the first cycle they call it, you have 21 days from the end of the audit to provide a root cause, preventative action, um, and all that information. Um, and then you submit it to PRI, and you have what they call a staff engineer review your responses. And if they're not sufficient, they go to a second cycle. And
Mm.
then at that point, you only have a week to provide your responses. So the timeline gets a lot shorter.
Right. Right.
so,
Right.
so,
Wow.
and you get 4 cycles in total. And we went to our 4th cycle. So there were a lot of changes that were made. A lot of revisions to our forms, a lot of revisions to our procedures. To satisfy the corrective actions and
Right.
hopefully prevent these findings from ever happening again.
Right.
That's
Right.
PRI's goal. Is why they're so detailed, or why they have such stringent requirements, is they never want you to have these findings again. So
Right.
um, so we
Yeah.
finally got our accreditation in early November. So
Mm.
that was a huge weight lifted all off our shoulders, and
Right.
we're really happy. We all achieved this together, and
Right.
as
Yeah.
a
Kind of
big
what a
thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what a relief to, kind of a long time this took to really do this, like you said, uh, and I guess, like you mentioned early on, is that customers are asking for this, right? They're asking for this. So not only does it, I guess, allow you all to, maintain your current customers, but I'm assuming that the goal is this is going to acquire possibly some newer customers for you all who are looking for those accreditations.
Yeah. This was definitely driven by customer demand. Um, there's many customers down here in San Diego County that um, make the parts for the same end user. So we
Mm.
saw a lot of those machine shops go away. Once the end user changed their quality requirements for chemical
Mm.
processors. So um, they relieved too. I'm happy to have Elite provide them metal finishing services again.
Mm.
Um, a lot of them had to go up to Orange County in LA, which is a whole other issue with transportation and all
Right.
that,
Right.
getting the parts up there. With us in San Diego County, there's, metal finishers are far and few between compared to Orange County and LA.
Right.
So,
Right.
and a lot of
Right.
these machine shops, really relied on us. So it's great to be doing work for them again. Super happy about that. They're really happy about it. So we just got to hold up our end of the bargain and keep passing
Now,
our audits.
well, I was gonna say, you passed the certification, but it doesn't stop. I mean, it's continual, right? It's going to happen. It's every day you all are going to be adhering to these regulations and such. So it seems like it's going to be an ongoing proposal for you all to keep it up, keep that quality up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, really, once the audit's done, that's really when the work when it's just the beginning. So this is the work never ends. So it was a great relief to pass our initial audit and to receive our accreditation.
Mm.
But it's up to us to uphold our end of the bargain and keep being compliant to the aerospace requirements. So we intend to do that, and onward and upward from here. And we're it's my long-term goal to get some of our other processes accredited. We currently, our scope includes anodize, chem film, and liquid paint. So, long term, I'd like to get our lectureless nickel process, our passivation process, and our dry film lube processes also accredited. So
Right.
I just need some more time to bring them into compliance, and hopefully we can be a one-stop shop for our aerospace customers, because we do so many different processes here right now. We're a one-stop shop for many of our commercial customers.